good morning, everybody, and welcome to The Art as Well. I'm delighted this morning to have our guest, who's a prominent painter, and his name is James Hanley. Now, James has been in practice for about 34 years. He's a long-standing member of the RHA. He was also a board member of the National Gallery of Ireland. He's a member of Ace Dóna since 2008 in recognition for his contribution to the arts in Ireland. He's also a director of an organization called Business to Arts. So let's go straight over to North Strand, yes, and say hello to James. Good morning, James. How are you?
Good morning. Very nice to be here. Thank you. Hello to everybody online.
So, James, tell us a little bit about why you chose portraiture before we go on to the other matters.
Well, my work had always been figurative, and with a strong narrative element. So the idea of a central character or characters, the dramatist persona, as it were, of a play, were always central to the work. And I was asked to do a portrait in about 1998 of the late Cathal Shannon, the famous broadcaster with RTE, by his wife Patsy for his 70th birthday. And that really started me off. And at that party, I met John McColgan and Moya Doherty, who become great friends and patrons, the Riverdance producers and directors. We paint Maureen Potter. And that led then to, a year later, getting asked to paint Ronnie Delaney for the National Gallery, and then Bertie Ahern's Taoiseach. And it just went from there. And I enjoy doing them. I enjoy the context and the history. And yeah.
And I gather you've done about 80 of these.
Well, no, I've done about, in total, I've done about 180 portraits, but maybe a little over 120 of them were commissioned.
Yes.
And so I've done quite a number of them. But to put that in context, Orpin died at 53, and I think he had painted 500 portraits. Now, he worked faster than I did, but so I'm a relatively slow worker, not hugely slow, but relatively slow worker.
Did I read somewhere that it might take you up to 2 years to complete a portrait?
No, well, I had a backlog a number of times over the years, whereby I was chasing my tail. Really, to be honest with you, it was quite stressful. Yeah, but it was just a number had backed up. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. I don't know where I read that, but
yeah, it was written somewhere. Yeah. It was.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, the other thing I wanted to ask you is do you have people sitting for hours on end with you, or do you work photos as well?
Some work from life and some work from photographs, and then when I'm making the painting, there's passages that I let myself be imaginative in how I realize them. So I like making of small details abstract parts to the painting. So particularly with drapery, I don't like to slavishly kind of reproduce drapery, but I like to find a shortcut or an interesting way to kind of interpret it. So there's a mixture of 3 or 4 elements within the picture. I mean, the most important thing is to get the pose right. Composition for me is everything. It's to get the if somebody's wearing a gown, is to get a very interesting and dynamic and compelling composition, and maybe something very simple that the viewer might not even notice, but if I hadn't got it right, they might notice it. So the placement of the figure on the canvas, how much of the canvas they actually inhabit, how low the head is from the top of the canvas, all of these things are critical in making the impact of the portrait.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And it was one thing you mentioned to me when we were having our initial chat, that very often you'll position somebody slightly below the art as such,
Yeah, well, there's kind of like a point of at least 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches below the top of the canvas. It just pushes them back further into the space, and it makes them breathe more in the canvas. And if there's a central axis, how to deal with that, because not everybody is perfectly symmetrical, so you've got to allow for that.
Yes.
So I mean, it sounds like it's not a very interesting subject, but it's key. If I get over this first hurdle, then the rest is actually just follows through easily enough, but that making that sense of composition is very, very critical.
So would you do a number of photographs to decide which pose is correct, and then use that as a
photographs and sketches, and mixing them together, and then a mixture of what I get from life. And because when you look at something, From a certain distance, it looks different from when you look at it up close. So you've got to make the thing read as if you're, looking at it from a distance, and also that you simplify things that you're not interested in. I mean, I don't particularly like the photorealist where everything has an obsessional finish. I think that a painting should breathe. There should be parts of the painting which are not even looser, but are less dense than other parts. You don't have to paint every single stitch in every part of the robe, and actually Orpen was a master of that as well, the economy of that, light hitting a particular part of the robe was just enough to suggest, a fold or a change in direction of the cloth.
Yes, okay. And did you have any family members that were into art, or were you just...
No, as my mother said, when I was bringing the president, Mary McLeish, around the RHA show in 2005, which was our 175th anniversary show, I was the designated person to bring the president around. My mother was with me, and the president said to my mother, "You must be very proud." And my mother said, "No, I think I got the wrong baby." And that's her line, which she's used over and over again. That's the wrong baby. There was no. I think my mother's father was in the Land Commission, and he was a very neat man and made very nice drawings of maps. Possibly comes from him, but it's a rogue. It's a rogue gene in every sense of the word.
Yeah. But you started very young in terms of wanting to draw.
Well, I was always drawing in school, and in fact, my teacher brought in a book I drew in 1979. I was 14, and I made this story. I wrote this story and illustrated it, and he brought me in to see Campbell Bruce, who was then the head of fine art in NCAD, about 1979. So I was always doing that, but then the teacher had a very bad influence on me because he had a very bad time in NCAD. So he poisoned my mind really about art college. So I went to UCD first.
Yes.
And had a very happy time there. I did a degree there in art history and English, which gave me a great grounding. I matured and was fantastic. I did all the L&H posters. And actually, I had 3 of the happiest years of my life in UCD.
And what was your experience like in the College of Art?
It was good. I mean, I was a bit older than the others, and you had to fight your case for being a figurative painter at the time. There was a move away from it. Although our year was the last year of a really vibrant year, 1991 graduates, of a really vibrant year of figurative painters, actually. Almost the last hurrah. It's chopped and changed a lot since then. But it was the beginnings of a very strong influence in the studio of the academic departments of the college, where they were really, really, really pushing a strong theoretical backbone to your work, a very strong theoretical justification. I didn't think it was very right to do that. Actually, I thought that was stymieing people. It was a bit overbearing at times. Now, most of the individuals who were teaching in that department are fantastic, and it was pure art history, and it wasn't complex or challenging in a negative way. It was very, very informative and good, and they are brilliant, brilliant people. But there was a certain coterie of people, and they grew later in life, and they grew later in to be a very dominant force in other art colleges where they were pushing a very, very strong theoretical basis. And I think it's too much for students to try, undergraduates to try and absorb such dense and alien material like French deconstructivists and all of that, literary theorists. Oh God, it's too much. It's too much, because you want kids coming into the art college to be given them the most time to just be creative and be creative. The idea of being creative is to produce at the end of the day something you didn't know you would do at the beginning of the day. Yes. You have to allow for a free flow, and for somebody to just to tumble around the place in a kind of a great maze and mess of uncertainty and enjoy it, and organically produce something, rather than having to justify everything with
formulaic.
Or with the dreaded artist statement.
Indeed. No, I remember hearing one of the judges, one of the eminent judges of the Sky Portrait Artist of the Year, referring to somebody's portrait while they were trying to, finish it off. And he said, oh, that's a typical art college treatment of the portrait. And I just thought, oh God, that's the last thing you want.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it's tougher. It's tougher. It's a tough place, I think, art school at the moment. It's a tough place because there are just so many options, and it's so open-ended, and it's you got to find your own voice.
Yeah.
Actually, the key word that somebody said to me recently about being an artist is authenticity. I'm going to write it up on the wall.
Yes.
And a few people said it afterwards. You've got to be authentic to yourself, and everybody has the gift of a great personal voice, and that is the great thing that art gives you. It gives you a self-sustaining voice.
Yes.
And the great enemy of being an artist is comparison.
Yes.
You cannot ever compare. Everybody does it.
Well, they say, James, comparison is the thief of joy.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. In a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me something else while we're on the subject of college. Do they teach you how to be a business person? And I'm saying that because no one seems to realize that artists are actually self-employed entrepreneurs. Don't care what you say, that they are.
Good. Yeah, very good. Very good question. When I was there, they were beginning to have lectures in professional practice, and they were very good. I'll tell you a funny story. One guy came in from the corporation, and he was talking about public liability for sculptures in parks. Okay, and somebody said, sure, look, that thing is 10 foot high. A kid couldn't clamber up that. What are you talking about? You're overreacting. And the guy from the corporation said, really? We rescued a child from the cross beam of the Papal Cross one time.
No.
Oh, if you think of the Papal Cross, it's like a girder. It's a chimney climb. You can do it easily enough. Getting around it at the top and going over onto the crossbeam would have been, I don't know, Evil Knievel wouldn't have done it. But they do. Yes, they did start doing that, and you're dead right. You have to be astute. And actually, funnily enough, now I don't apply for grants and stuff, and I don't do public sculpture or public commissions. But I believe there's reams of paperwork to be tackled there, and and actually sculptors in particular who do public work, they have to be registered for VAT. They have to employ engineers and architects, accountants. So yes, they certainly do have a lot of work. The straightforward painter, you just as long as you do your returns, and know how to build properly. And I'm the worst at doing all that. Course as well. I put my head in the sand.
Well, exactly, and I mean those two talents don't necessarily go hand in hand. That's I'm making the point. But it's important to try and align yourself with somebody who has those skills.
It is, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to go straight into some of your work and have a look at that, because I think a lot of that will show people the sort of the character and nature of yourself. All right. So here's one of your dad. Am I right?
Yeah. So I put this up first because, in many ways, this sums up everything for me in life, about art and life together. And it's a portrait of my late father, who died tragically in 2011 of an anaphylactic shock through a medical procedure of which he was not allergic to the particular drug. And I was there before. I came with my mother. We were the only two in Ireland. My siblings were abroad. And I watched my mother close his eyes, which was very, very moving. And he was lying he was a big man, 6'3". But I brought the drawing to a talk I gave that was organized by Enda Wiley, the fantastic poet, in Sing Street. And I was talking to the boys about portraiture. And I had the portrait of my dad with me. I don't know what happened, but when I picked it up, I don't know where it came from. Deep within my psyche, I just said, these are the eyes that saw me before I saw myself. And Enda was really moved by that. And she wrote a beautiful poem about it. and she entitled her next anthology, The Painter on His Bike. Now, Enda's father is Jack Wiley. He's a retired executive from ESB, and he was an intermediate director of the RHA back in the early 90s. And he was there at the time when they were, and responsible for me getting the Keating McLaughlin medal sponsored by the ESB in 1990 as a student, which kickstarted my career.
Yeah.
And it was a major thing, the first painting I ever exhibited, and I got the medal. And so now I've reconnected with Jack, and I've done a portrait like my dad's of him as a present to him, so that the circle comes full.
Yeah, very good.
Circle.
And we're going to see that portrait, that the one that you did.
I don't know if I have the portrait of Jack, but that's.
Oh no, sorry, no, but of the one that you won the medal for.
Yes. Oh yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Now this goes back to your youth.
Yeah, so this is the book I mentioned that I drew. It was called The Fall of the Rhubarbian Empire, and it was Roman soldiers fighting the Vikings. And I used to love all of this kind of stuff, doing all this detail, all the heads of the Roman soldiers, and the Roman emperors hiding behind the door. And that's the center page, and it was a text. That was just the center spread. There was text and on the other pages. So my art teacher brought this in to show it to Campbell Bruce, and Campbell Bruce eventually I got to know as a man. I got to know him. He was made an honorary member of the RHA. I subsequently did a portrait of him, which I donated to NCAD. His wife was there, and his family, and all the staff. So that's a funny thing as well. The 14-year-old boy becomes the man who, does those things for Campbell out of great love and respect for him. So it's that's the joy of life. That's the satisfaction of what I do. That's the magic, and is those moments of connectivity and love, I suppose, ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's why I asked you about why portraiture, because I think it gives you that very unique insight and intro to people you normally have met.
Totally, it's an incredible privilege. That you get this strange entree and unique. And some of the people you end up having a connection with and becoming friends with. Others, it's just a job. And so, but ultimately, it's an incredible privilege.
Right. And this is your college days.
Yeah. So when I went to UCD, I had to park the idea of painting and going to art college for a while. I wasn't too sure if I would go to art college afterwards. This was a terribly depressed time in Ireland, 84 to 87. It was miserable. It was a recession, and it was a bleak time. So I ended up doing all of these RHA posters for the then auditor, and I did all the Ents office posters, like for all the gigs for Mickey O'Rourke, who is a friend who went on to found Setanta Sports. So there were amazing people around that time in the college, and these posters are A1, they're huge, and I did them on acetate, and I would do them like in a day, a night, and I would do them on the bedroom floor, and I would, I wouldn't have a huge cachet of images. This was pre-internet, so I don't know, I trawled old history books and magazines to find photographs of Des or wigs or whatever I was using.
Yes.
But the great thing about these posters is, and I have 70 of them, is that they, and I might show them or do something with them, is that they're a real slice of Ireland of the mid-80s, all the great debates to abortion, divorce, the Constitution, the North, and the people that came down. I mean, David Trimble came down. There you see Edward Corbyn is there on one particular poster. Maurice Manning, who I went on to paint, actually, Bruce Arnold, Pat McCartan, Michael D. Higgins, our now president. And these were all eminent people, of the day, and or who will become even more eminent. Sean McBride was one of the speakers. Yes. Oh no, it's kind of unbelievable looking back at them. And my professor of art history in UCD, who still is a great friend, he was the first Church of Ireland professor in the Catholic University, Alistair Rowan, professor of art history, and we became great friends and still are, because he saw one of these posters and he took me aside and said, that was great, and who are you, and tell me about yourself. And so that was the first. I was in awe that this professor was talking to me. I was only out of school, and it sounds crazy, but I love him so much, and we're still great friends. And those moments of encouragement, you just never forget.
True.
Charlie Whisker was from the North. He was a very cool man, and he was an artist, and he was a tutor in NCAD, and he was a video director out in LA for a couple of years. And Charlie had this incredible head. And funny enough, I always wanted to paint him, but I never asked him. And then his partner, Julia Kelly, she asked me, would I paint him in about 2015, as sadly he was just slipping into this state of Alzheimer's, which was very cruel and awful for such a vibrant man. And this is that moment. And so Charlie actually interviewed me for NCAD. So again, it's one of these unbelievable moments that I would go on then to make a painting of him. And that painting was used at his funeral 2 years ago in the Unitarian Church. And Bono, he was a great friend of Bono and the family, that family of U2. And Bono sang beside this, the portrait, you know. So it's kind of like, I don't know. It's a rich life in that way, you know, and an honor actually, of course, you know. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. Now this is the portrait you did.
Yeah, that's the painting I did, and yeah, that I won the medal for. The painting is only about 3 foot by 2. I did it in Glasgow School of Art when I was there on an exchange in 1990. Glasgow School of Art. I was so excited to go there. It was a beautiful building designed by Charles Rennie Mackintosh as a purpose-built art school from 1890 to 1910. It was built in 2 phases, and it was the first fire was in 2014, which destroyed the studio I worked in and the beautiful library. And in 2018, when they were just finishing the restoration of that, there was a catastrophic fire, and the building is completely gutted. Nobody died. That's the main thing. But the loss of this art, I mean, I can't begin to tell you how inspiring it was to go into this building. It was just magical. The studios were purpose-built, north-facing windows for the optimum light for painting, that cool blue light. All of the detail was exquisite. Charles Rennie Mackintosh designed not only the structure and the internal structure, but he designed the doors, the windows, the glass, the doorknobs. A little piece of the beautiful glass fell out of the door when I was there one time. And I was there in 1990, and I shouldn't say this, but I pocketed it. I thought, who's going to notice this? And when I was back later about it, I said, Jesus, what was I thinking? I must bring this back. And I brought it back the next visit I went to Glasgow, and I put it just somewhere safe. So that all went up in fire anyway. But I mean, look, it's
yeah.
It's awful. So I did that, and of course, Glasgow. Just go back to the art school link. Glasgow School of Art at that time in the 80s. Some of their graduates became some of the most feted painters of the day, figurative painters. Stephen Campbell, Adrian Wisniewski, Peter Howson, and Ken Curry. They became these, and Stephen Conroy. And I found them inspirational. And I ended up meeting Stephen Campbell when I was over there. He has subsequently died, but he was a great painter, and doing my thesis on him. So everything about that Glasgow period was an incredible injection. And I came back, exhibited the painting in the RHA in 1990, won the award. There's the medal. Keating, after Sean Keating, the president of the RHA, who made the work outside Ardna Crusher, and McLaughlin, I think, is the engineer of Ardna Crusher. And so that's the medal. And I got 1,000 punt, which was huge at the time.
A lot of money.
I bought back the painting 20 years later. It's kind of funny, you know, I did the painting I did the painting in 1990. 10 years later, I was elected to the RHA, and so it's been in my kind of life for a very long time.
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah, this is one of, my degree show was one of 9 paintings, and I started looking at the idea of autobiographical paintings, the myth of men lost within their own myths, lost within the world, lost within the landscape, where the landscape was both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It's kind of rites of passage and kind of loss of innocence, and the uncertainty of growing up and all of that. And the life belt became a kind of a totemistic kind of image of salvation, redemption, but it had the kind of the red and the white of the body and blood. They were kind of almost biblical colors in that sense. And so this is the doubting Thomas, but instead of doubting Christ, he's doubting himself. And I realized that that's what I had. I have a lot of doubt all my life, doubt and anxiety.
Yes.
It's plagued me all my entire life. And I just, when I saw this recently come up for auction, and I'd forgotten, the title, and I went, my God, even back then I was making this painting subconsciously, not knowing that it was about myself.
Yes.
So that's that one. Yeah. So that led into, when I left art college, and you talk about professional practice, I was very lucky. My degree show sold out, and Bernadette Madden, the artist, brought my mother-in-law, she wasn't my mother-in-law then, but Bree Jukes, who ran the Riverrun Gallery, to see my degree show. And she gave me a solo show, which I worked on for about a year. I made 40 paintings, and it was a huge show, all big paintings, like 6'5", 5 foot, 4 foot, 3 foot, 2 foot. And they continue that idea of loss of innocence and the idea of the forest. I was very interested in the outside world in an abstracted form, a suggestion of nature, which was both seductive and had a frisson to it, a sense of danger and a loss of innocence. And I was looking to romantic poetry, particularly Wordsworth, and I had the couplet I used to describe the show was, fair seed time had my soul, and I grew up fostered alike by beauty and by fear. And I could put it on my headstone easily enough, because I think it's a beautiful quote. And it's like, we're fostered by beauty and by fear. And a lot of it was I would use recurring motifs like the Christ figure, the life belt. But this little figure in the background holding the flag was a friend of mine, Brian Cronin, who was a school friend of mine. And he took his own life in 1986, just when we left school, in a very violent way. And he became as well a key part of the work, only made manifest in one painting, but underscoring the rest of the work, because it was a very traumatic and powerful assault on our senses. There was a group of us, 4 or 5 of us, who were best friends with him, and I still think about him all the time. And so this is him, and it's called Nobody Home. And it's funny because I had my own crisis, and I reconnected with his father and his sister about 5 years ago. And I had Brian's medal that he won in Turner College, where we went, his gold medal he won. And I remember him getting the medal on the stage in the concert hall. And I'd kept the medal for 31 years, treasured it. It was my most treasured possession. His mother gave it to me the morning after he died.
Yes.
And on the day I met his father, I gave it back to him. I gave it to his father. I said, John, you have nothing belonging to Brian. I want you to have this medal. I had it for 31 years. I want you to have it now. And he just took it. He was so he loved the fact that he has the medal, basically. Anyway, so that's it. Life is strange, and it's all loaded with emotion sometimes.
Very delicate.
Yeah, and delicate and profound, of course, profound.
Yeah.
And that's another one of the paintings from that. There was 40 paintings. I can't show them all. That's called Quarrel of the Beast. But that's a kind of a seminal painting from that body of work, where the horse, the beast, is a manifestation of the landscape. You can see the horse emerging from the landscape, reacting to the violence of the figure hanging from the tree or whatever. And that was a key. So they were very expressive paintings. I was marrying 2 narratives always in them. There was a narrative of what you saw, and then what it would suggest. And there were evocations of space rather than specific geographical locations. So it was and I did them fast. I did them with incredible energy, and I was fearless making them, and they were kind of cathartic, and I loved making them. Yeah.
Yes. And just on a technical point, James, do you use a palette knife with that, or is it a combination of things?
Maybe to scrape, mainly brushes, but I might have scraped back some of the paint. But I never use a palette knife in terms of application of paint or in pastel. It's always the brush, but I might scrape it back a bit. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. It's wonderful work.
Oh, thanks. And then I suppose when I moved from a studio, that was all done in an older studio on Angel Street. And then I moved to a studio on Trinity Street, which I was there for the next 26 years. And because it was a new clean space, I took away all of the external world, and I focused on figures that I selected, models who were backed up against the wall, and became the focus of the same kind of thing: male myths, people trapped in their identities, and but much more claustrophobic. So there was a harsh light, and I used this green, which was the green of an institutional place, like a ward or an asylum or I don't know, police station or whatever.
Yes.
And they and I made them just self-contained little narratives. So it's called Endgame. So he's turning the guns on himself in the mirror. And Endgame is a Beckett play. So it's all, and I've again used the mask and the Christ figure again to underscore the kind of references to history and to religion and to the past. Yeah. That's a big painting, 5 foot by 4.
And this is Ronnie.
Yeah, Ronnie. So I suppose I got when the portraits started happening, then I got the portrait. So in a way, the figurative work that I had hitherto done was slightly parked a little bit for a number of years, and I'm trying to get back to it. But the portraits really took over, and of course you can't. And of course, I'm looking at the portraiture in the same way as I'm looking at all my paintings. I'm looking at it in terms of history, in terms of myth, in terms of identity, in terms of role. And so when I got the Ronnie Delaney commission, I was over the moon, obviously, to paint Ronnie for the National Gallery and to paint a man whose achievement really has never been diminished with time, which I think is very important. He ran the mile in a very, very, very competitive time where there were great racers, great runners at that time as well. But I felt with a portrait of a runner, you had to show the legs. So that's why I chose to do a 7 foot by 5 painting, to show the full body and to show the legs. Now, even though he ran from he didn't start from a kneeling point of view. He started the race from a standing point of view. I still have him sitting, just that's easier. But I showed the legs and I showed the ghosted running track and the boots. And then around the figure, I put the different posters and images which represented the various stages of his life. So I wanted if a kid came in 50 years' time, they would understand who this man was from the story that I drew with the images. So on the front of Sports Illustrated and running in Madison Square Gardens and crossing the line. And I actually did all of those things in a different kind of style. So I did the Sports Illustrated like a Norman Rockwell, and the figure above his head, the picture above his head is painted like a photo, and then the other one is like a stencil. And so anyway.
Wonderful. What was he like as an individual when you were painting him?
Oh, he's very, very nice, Ronnie. And he loved the idea of it, of course. We've maintained a good friendship over the last 20 years.
Yes. Nice guy. Now, this is quite controversial.
Yeah, well, I did Bertie's portrait, and when I did that, I mean, it's kind of funny. I'm in his constituency, but I grew up in Templeogue. I went to Trinity College, but we lived in Balgriffin in the early 70s. And since 96, myself and Orla, my wife, live in the North Strand. So I think Bertie was glad that I was in his constituency, but I had to keep quiet that I was a Southside boy in many ways. I'm being facetious, but it was a great one to get. And it was, look, I would have come from a staunchly Fine Gael family, but like, it was a great honor to paint the Taoiseach, and it was at the height of his powers. It was just at the day after 9/11 I met him. It took me a long time to meet him. He didn't want it done, I think, for a long time. Yeah. And then, of course, when it became a very, very public thing, when the tide turned a little bit, as we all know. So there was lots of people, nitpicking about the portrait and the money that was spent on it and all of this. It's very easy for people to to maybe say how many hospital beds the portrait might have got, but there's money. We all know in the past that there was money for 1 million hospital beds that was squandered in other stuff, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
This is John Murray, and Liz will know John because Liz did a fabulous portrait bust of John as Chancellor of UL, University of Limerick. But I painted John as Chief Justice in 2010. I painted 4 portraits of him, a private portrait, this the official portrait for King's Inns. The OPWO was commissioned a small sketch for the 4 courts, and I did one for John as judge in the European Court of Justice. And this was an amazing one to get. And he brought in the new judicial robes, which we have now, which are the more simplified robes. But I asked him, mischievously, could I see the wig? Because I really wanted to paint the old clobber, this old wonderful almost Victorian, handed down from the British, the frock coat and the waistcoat. And so I said, would you not like to be the last Chief Justice to be painted in the historic robes? And he said, yes, okay, yeah. So we forged a good friendship. He used to invite me to a meal, a lunch every Christmas. I was very sad. He died. He died suddenly just after Christmas, and
Yes.
it's amazing how I was just saying to her, I just was very sad because I got to know him well, and when he was Chief Justice, he was quite formal, you know, and as you know, as befits the office.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, then but then well, you know, you're on with him. He was good fun, and so.
Do you think, James, that people are very vulnerable when they're having their portrait painted?
Well, there's two things
in the sense that it's totally outside their comfort zone, and in the sense they're showing off who they are.
Yeah, it's
anything.
Yeah, well, you're very interesting points there. Two points. First of all, most of the portraits I do, the person hasn't commissioned it. Okay. So it's been commissioned on their behalf, and so they have a little bit of what's the word? They're not entirely in control in the sense that they're not the paymaster, or they're not doing it for themselves. So it's something to be done, and so they go with it. They go with the flow. They enter into it very willingly, with great sense of excitement and anticipation. Yes. That's genuine. And at the second time, the second point is, I suppose they would want to feel that they are portrayed appropriately. So, for example, if I'm painting John Murray in this particular context, I'm painting him as the Chief Justice. I'm not painting him as the man sitting watching the telly at home, right? So you have to be cognizant of the role and the authority and the dignity of the role. And I'm very much that's my shtick. I do respect that, and I get that, and I don't try and bend or break the rules. And so for a judge, for example, as I said to my wife at the time, he has to be seen face on. You can't be seen from the side. There can't be seen to be a side to a judge, if you know what I mean. So all of those things, I think you've got to get right, and you've got to get the sense of dignity. And
there was a thing I was alluding to earlier, James. Sorry for interrupting you there.
Oh, no.
Where to me now, correct me if I'm wrong, the focal point of the artist looking at the subject there is almost at their chest, if not their throat, and therefore the subject is actually looking down slightly, which would befit his authority.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
you know.
I had him. Yes, I did put him high up in on the podium to make. Yes, I did, to make him look, because he would be looking down. Yeah. Not in a bad way, but he would be. That the height thing was very important. You know, that's the status, and that's the kind of the stage, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. This is lovely. I love this one.
Yeah. So I've done 3 chiefs of staff, and this is the late General David Stapleton. I painted also Colm Mangan, and also the late Dermot Earley, who was a very, very, very famous and popular man in Irish life. But so look, I was a big fan of Michael Collins when I was a kid. So to have the uniform, to paint the uniform of Collins, you know, the modern day version of the Chief of Staff, and of course I enjoyed painting all of that detail, and again getting it right, you know. And the paintings in the mess had been in McKee Barracks had been a mixture of sizes, and I did 3 in a row, and I did them all the same size. So I wanted to kind of, in my own way, say, anybody from now on, do a decent big painting, you know, and up the ante on the kind of. And Conor Walton did 3 fabulous subsequent Chiefs of Staff, and he more or less did the same size. And I'm not trying to self-aggrandize here, but I felt like that. You know, in a way, you've got to up the game. You've got to up your game, and you've got to also simultaneously up the ante on the commission and on the painting in that institution. So I did 6 in a row of presidents of the Royal College of Surgeons. I did them, you know, that decent size, life size, all the same size, and I'm kind of proud of that. You know,
we have one coming up.
Yeah. Eilish McGovern is a heart surgeon, first woman president of all of the colleges, the surgical colleges in these islands. Yes. And she's a wonderful woman. Normally there's a very, very heavy, large chain of office, and that's the smaller version that she's wearing. And I just, there's a kind of a lightness there I wanted to get. So I posed her within the natural daylight of the stairwell there in the older building, and just some simple architectural detail.
Yeah. Beautiful portrait. Yeah, I would have known her as Miss McGovern.
Miss McGovern, right. Yeah, you said you knew her. Yeah, you said yeah.
Oh no, not that well, but
yeah. Yeah, Senator Mitchell. I mean, it's funny. I painted this portrait of him in 2012 as Chancellor of Queen's, and I only met him briefly. I only had an hour to meet him, and in Belfast, and it was an amazing experience to meet him, obviously, and we clicked, and the painting was brought out to not this one now, but the one in the robes as Chancellor was brought out to New York for a fundraiser for the Queen's alumni. And as we know, we've just celebrated or commemorated rather 25 years of that Good Friday Agreement. And I had the great honor of painting him as Chancellor of Queen's University. And actually, Hillary Clinton is now the Chancellor. And so I painted him up there. I met him 2012, and then subsequently he asked me to paint him for the state capital in Maine as senator, and I couldn't believe it. It's fantastic. And then he asked me to do a third painting. He was briefly a judge in Maine, so I painted him in judicial robes. But I love this photograph because I loved the West Wing, and I kind of think this is the closest I'm going to get to the West Wing. Some kind of
you weren't actually there, unfortunately, weren't you?
Sure. No, I couldn't go over. No, I couldn't go over. But yeah, so that's him there. Yeah, and he great face. And I have another small sketch of him, and a small sketch of Bertie Ahern, which is at the moment in an exhibition in Hillsborough Castle of artists' work from that period, from the peace process. Sketches of, I think there's sketches of Tony Blair and Bill Clinton and everything. But you know, he was as a man, he does not mince his words. He's very, very astute, and he's very, 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 very much to the point. I could imagine that there would be no messing with him, you know.
Sure.
And he was the man, definitely, who was needed, and he had the authority to just speak across all the different parties, for sure.
Yeah. Right. Now, this is a very interesting one. A good friend.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, this is both a great and a very sad story. The man who's there in the shorts is John O'Brien, and he was from Chicago. He was well, first of all, to say that he was an extraordinarily wealthy man in monetary terms, but he was a far wealthier man in terms of his love and his kindness. And he came over maybe about 10 years ago with his CEO and cousin. They were looking to buy Irish art, and somebody mentioned my name that I'd be a good person to bring them around. And we became great friends. And we were back and forth a couple of times to Chicago, and he knew that my dad had died so suddenly. So I painted his own father, and his father only died last year, aged 103, and he was one of the founding members of the Chicago Stock Exchange. And his mother, John's mother, only died 1 week before her 100th birthday last year. So John was amazing, and he asked me to paint his sister, who's the girl in the middle of the painting with the strapless dress, the black dress. Yeah. Yes. His sister Laurie and her 5 best friends, who he calls the Woodlands girls. They were all girls who went to a Catholic school, the Woodlands in Chicago, and this was all to celebrate their 60th birthdays. And he was putting this painting in pride of place in this phenomenal house which he was building. And we saw it at various stages in Chicago on the lake, where he housed a special museum of like a museum quality collection of Irish art and artifacts, Georgian furniture, every painter you could think of going back 200 years, and extraordinary. So I painted this painting, but while I was painting, I got ill and I wasn't very well. And he came over at one stage, and he basically paid for my hospitalization to get well. And he was so generous. And I told him when he came back in September, this is 2017, I said, I'll do your portrait to thank you, John. And I started working on it, took photograph sketches. And he went back to America, and the next thing we learned, he got cancer himself. And Orla kept saying to me, my wife, finish that portrait, you must finish his portrait. And I finished it this time last year. And I went out and he saw it, and he died then tragically and sadly. We're heartbroken, really. He died last July. And his wife rather, Pat, said to us they couldn't use an open casket, so they used the portrait in the funeral parlor. So it was just this amazing story of everything coming full circle and doing right by him, you know, showing him that I was so grateful he saved my life basically, and I'm so grateful and so thankful. and that it had come full circle, that the portrait was there for him and that he got to see it. But it's also the absolutely, you know, staggering unfairness that he had worked so hard all his life and been so kind and so generous to so many people, and he got to enjoy this fabulous house for just about a year, you know.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah.
And particularly
Yeah.
since his parents outlived him by such a
Yeah.
number of years.
Unbelievable, unbelievable.
Yeah.
You would think longevity. So life is cruel. Yeah. Anyway.
So he's a very special
Oh
place
yes,
in
yes,
your
very
heart.
special
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yes.
Okay.
That's just a big commission I did for John McColgan, and when he chaired the centenary event for the Abbey Theatre, which was in 2004, and he asked me just to do a painting. This is 13 feet across by 7 foot high. It's a triptych. The central panel is bigger. It's not correct scale there. So I just picked. He gave me carte blanche. So I just picked my famous scene from my favorite play, The Playboy of the Western World, and then I painted the script on one side and I painted the audience on the other. Yes. So I called it Abbey 100, authorship, audience, authorship, acting, audience, the three components of a play. And it was amazing. You talk about kind of what the artist has to do. I came up with the concept, painted the painting, got it framed, delivered to the Abbey. Then on the night of the unveiling, I was on the stage and I was talking to Bertie. He was launching it, and I talked to the audience and to Bertie about the painting. Then that painting was taken off stage and the play began. There was a performance of The Playboy of the Western World. I then was out the front with the lads, hanging the painting, sweat dripping from my good suit I was wearing, bought them a few pints, cleaned up, back in for the interval, saw the second half of the play, and afterwards we came out then and there was kind of schmoozing and talking. But Bosco Hogan, the actor, is a friend of mine. He said to me, he introduced me to Michael Yates, the son of William Butler Yeats, and I didn't know he was there in the audience, you know. And I was so bowled over to meet him, you know. He was about 82 or 3, because Yeats had him late in life, fathered him late in life. And I said, Mr. Yates, my God, if I'd known you were in the audience, I would have broke protocol. I would have said to you, come up on the stage. You know, you should have been up on the stage. You know. Anyway, but that was another great privilege, meeting him, the poet's son. You know.
Certainly was. Yeah.
I've done a number of stamps, and the Christmas stamps were amazing because if you studied art history, you will have studied all these great biblical events and how many artists have portrayed them over the years. So I can't begin to describe to you the boyish excitement of doing a stamp.
I'll tell you why, because there were 27 million of them sold.
That's right. There was 27 million of the little ones done. Yeah. And I used my crib figures and I just set them up and I lit them and then I painted them. But it's like you get a cap for Ireland. You do it for free almost, you know. Yes, and then to see them when they come out is just, it's like anybody when they see their catalogue for a show come out, they're very excited to see something in print. Yeah. But yeah, that was a great moment. Yeah.
Very good.
So the life painting, the life drawing and painting, which unites so many of us in a wonderful democracy of activity, is part and parcel of the RHA activity. And when you make a painting, I mean, they're done in one day, and you start at 10, finish at 6. You've got to be in really good fit condition, not tired. You got to have your water, your fruit, your paint, everything set out, and you just go for it, and you're exhausted at the end of it. But the next day, you really are overwhelmed by what you see, because if you're in your studio, you know your practice, you know the marks you make, you slip into particular methodologies and stylistic mannerisms or whatever. When you're in the life room, you just forget that, and you're just looking at the color, the tone, the line. Yes. And so it turns out the next day to be a revelation, and a very lovely revelation, and you've surprised yourself.
Almost as if you didn't do it.
Exactly. And it's rich and rewarding. And of course, it's so good for you to navigate the world on a two-dimensional surface, figure to ground, you know, all of those things. Yeah. So I do a body of work based on travel, which are called souvenirs. They're 20 by 16 inches, and I paint this blue aperture around which is to suggest that the painting is not a painting per se, but it's a quotation of a painting, or it's a painting of a painted scene. So it kind of, by its nature, it's to reflect maybe a postcard or a film still or a photograph. And so they're of all places that I travel to, and they need not be spectacular places like Niagara Falls. They could be a corner of a road or a lamppost or a plane in the sky.
Yes.
And then there are fabulous places like the pyramids at Giza, or awful places like Auschwitz I've painted. And this actually is an installation in the Venice Biennale a couple of years ago, where there was this floating fake figure. And I just thought it was just a compelling piece. So I enjoy those. And that's a very old tradition with artists. I mean, if you go back to Delacroix, who went to Tangiers in Africa, and that, you know, where artists first traveled and painted what nobody saw before. And so in a way, like, I'm not saying that this is anyway definitive, or I'm not saying, and they could be hackneyed things that I paint, but I'm saying, I don't care. I'm seeing them for myself for the first time, so that they're a record for myself of the enjoyment and pleasure and thrill of actually going to see these places.
Yes, exactly. All right, we're going to finish in the next, there's only three further ones that or maybe four, that I'd like to go through quite quickly, because I want to give enough time to people to ask questions.
Sure.
And so on. So let's briefly talk about these.
Okay, well, very briefly, the body of work I did during lockdown, Alan, was 120 drawings I made of statues. Now, statues I've been involved with in my for about 15 years. When I first looked at a statue and thought, wow, that's a beautiful looking thing. That's a ready-made. That's something that I can just draw, and already I get the rub of the relic. I get the history and the pose and the beauty of that, of the sculpted piece, this magnificent piece of art that's there in 3D. I can draw it like a model, and I get all of the frisson of what it might suggest. And so I photograph and draw and annotate statues, of hundreds of them, that I've all over North America, like mainly European capitals, but North America and other places, all classical statues, no modern statues. And so I just draw them, and then I add these little comic interventions, or maybe political interventions, or like, that's Washington, and at the same time the Black Lives Matter was happening, and he was a slave owner, etc. So I'm not judging anybody. I'm just, as somebody said, you're being insightful without judgmental. So sometimes they're just very gentle, little provocations. But first and foremost, I want to make as beautiful as drawing as I possibly can to the true nature of the work, and then add the things afterwards. So I have 120 of these done. They're going to be shown in the RHA in August, which I'm over the moon about. 25th of August to the 1st of October this year. I'm absolutely over the moon to be able to show them there in the bicentenary year. And I have a lot of them, and I think there's a lot of looking in them, and I think people, I hope, will enjoy them. And statues are very topical at the moment, because we're questioning everything. We're questioning what should stay up, what should stay down. It's a contentious thing. This is Velasco, the great Spanish painter, and I just put him in the Spanish football colors, and I'm giving him the golden palette as opposed to the golden boot, and he's won it 5 years there, 1660, 24, whatever. I think there's one left. I think there's one left.
There is, yes.
Oh yeah. No, that's just one of the bigger paintings that I do, and I'm trying to get back to all these other paintings where I just make these kind of layered observations on history and empire and role playing and myth, and really the same thing that I'm going back to at the very beginning, but in a slightly different way. All the different empires and how the world's carved up, and all of the protagonists. So.
Yeah, I love the way you've renamed Australia Foster's.
Foster's, exactly, yeah, exactly.
It could have been 4X as well, you know.
Yeah, I know, yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. I should say that one of the reasons we didn't visit your studio is because the work that you're doing, that you're going to be showing in is littered everywhere. So you've got the entire place, and it would be a bit of a killjoy to actually see them here before they're actually exhibited. So we understand that fully.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So look, we're going to ask people to come in and ask questions if they wish. But can I ask you one before we start? And that is, who is a painter, one particular painter that you truly admire, and why?
Patrick Hennessy. And you see how quickly I said it.
I'm amazed, because we didn't rehearse this bit. I actually forgot to say that I might ask you that question.
I have a lovely Patrick Hennessy. I could run down and get it. I have a nice drawing and a painting. Just for his technical verisimilitude, absolutely exquisite Patrick Hennessy. And some of them people say are little chocolate box, but he painted lots of beautiful, exquisite still lifes. Just the tactile quality of the subject is phenomenal. The richness, the way he used paint. Paint a lot of horses, paint a lot of scenes in the countryside of Ireland and abroad. He was gay. His partner was Harry Robinson Clarke, and so there's a number of works which are quite homoerotic when they went to Tangiers and when they went to Portugal. But he had phenomenal output and was hugely successful and commercially successful. And I've always loved him, and I have a painting of his in the 40s, and I have a drawing. And years later, I was asked by Sean Kissan, the curator, he put together the retrospective of Hennessy and in IMA, and he asked me to write a piece about the technique. And I kind of was bowled over, you know. I couldn't believe that I was going to try, because I had to try and figure it out myself. You know, you can't always know how he did it, but I did it as true as I could to my own observation. And it was one of that again, was a great honor to do that. And I also, there's a painting behind me of Leo Whelan, who was Ortman's great master and a great student pupil. And I love Leo Whelan's portraits as well. And Ortman, of course,
Fantastic. Okay. I'm going to read out a few comments. Colin Eaton says, bowled over by the work, James, the richness of the work, but also the richness and depth of the connections and journey process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria Gabriela Serpi says, wonderful portraitist. Maria's in Rome. Elizabeth O'Kane says, beautiful portrait of John Murray James. You really got him. He was a lovely man. Yvonne Maloney O'Keefe says, subsequent portraits so different from the first and even more fascinating, skillful and narrative. Marvelous, Yvonne. Thanks for that. Quarrel of the Beast is an amazing painting, Owen says. Owen McLaughlin.
Thank you, Owen.
Nicola, so true. Our college should have required business modules. Absolutely, Nicola. Angelis, the dreaded artist statement, hilarious. Agree 100%. I think that's it.
It's just lovely to see that work. It's an extraordinary collection of work. And I recall the early pieces that you showed there. I think one was a slaughterhouse. I don't know if you showed that. I came in a bit late.
Yeah.
But, I just love the narrative quality of your work. And then there's the way you've brought us through where you are today. And it's just tremendous. Congratulations. I'm just bowled over with the extraordinary collection of work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Owen. I know Owen of old and his wonderful son, Austin. So thank you for those kind words, Owen. Appreciate it. And your lovely paintings you make yourself as well, honestly.
You're very good. Thank you. Thanks, James. Well done.
Thank you, Owen. Now, Carol says, James is not only a great artist, but a great human being. And I've heard that more than once from people.
Well, thank you.
Stephanie McLaughlin says, fostered by beauty and by fear, could you please ask James the name of that poet? Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Love the observations on magic moments in life.
Yeah.
Do you know the name of the poet?
Yeah, it's the prelude to William Wordsworth. It's William Wordsworth.
Wordsworth. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Eilish, thanks, James.
Yeah.
And Alan. Jen Donnery says, fantastic talk. Very enjoyable, informative. Thank you. Una's iPhone says, thank you so much, James. An inspirational conversation, really generous and open.
Thank you.
And I think I've covered everybody there. Can I ask you, other than marrying Orla, what would you consider to be the greatest highlight in your life or achievement?
Well, marrying Orla and of course, and there's been many highs in too many to mention in this lecture. I mean so many highs. I went with the army to Bosnia in 1996 for 8 days to do a painting based on their peacekeeping out there. But no, there's been so many different things within the RHA. I suppose it's kind of things like many years ago, I got a painting rejected by the Arnott's portrait show, and I couldn't believe it. I was a student. I said, "Oh, it's done a mistake." Like every artist, and it's a terrible thing to not have your piece accepted. I understand that completely.
Yeah.
And I rang Jackie Stanley, the late Jackie Stanley, and she was one of the judges, and she said, "You're not supposed to ring the judges," she said. And then the ground to open up in my little house. I wanted that ground to open up in my family home and swallow me. And then she was a great character, and she uttered the great line. She said, she said, just because it was checked out doesn't mean it was a daft painting. And subsequently, I opened 2 of Jackie's exhibitions. We were involved in making her an honorary member of the RHA. We got her a show in the RHA for drawings in 2017, and she asked me to open 2 of her exhibitions, and I did the portrait of her husband, and she was present when I donated it to NCAD, and all the staff came back. And 3 weeks ago, I just finished writing Jackie's obituary. I wrote her obituary.
Did you? Yes.
So the 23-year-old becomes the 57-year-old man who writes her obituary after all that time. That to me is an honor. It's not so much a highlight. It's just like, that is just the wonder of life and the richness of it and the blessing of it, that we can have that relationship with somebody and we can go through all of that, and you can be part of to influence in certain ways for good. And there you go.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Good answer too.
One last highlight.
Yeah.
Just when I did visit Gracelands.
Did you?
Yeah, when I was.
You have to finish that story then. Go on.
Okay, so I was getting a train across America. I was 30. I said I get a train down from Memphis to from Chicago to Memphis. Got there at 6 a.m. in the morning, freezing November morning. Got a bus out to Gracelands. It was about 7:30. Nothing was open, but the gates were open. And the thing didn't open until 9. So I wandered up, and seemingly you can wander around. It was about 8 o'clock when I wandered up, and it was freezing cold. And suddenly I was at the pool, and there was a man there just taking the leaves off the pool. And Elvis is just buried at the pool, Elvis, his mother, his father, and his twin son, Aaron. And the man takes a photograph of me at the pool. And I have half an hour just standing there at Elvis's grave. I was a huge fan. And I'm kind of going, this is magic. And then I went off to get a breakfast somewhere. When I came back, there was thousands of people there. It was the second busiest tourist attraction after the White House. So that moment actually was kind of funny. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Very good, James. Okay, listen, thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
a wonderful character, and I really enjoyed chatting to you. I hope you enjoyed it too. I know I speak for everyone else to say how much they enjoyed it. And we covered a massive amount of ground too. So look, thank you so much. I wish you well for your future, and we'll keep in touch and let people know what you're up to as and when, and including that exhibition you're going to be doing.
I'll send you all invitations, and thank you very much, Alan, and thank you very much for everybody who tuned in. It was lovely to see you all, and I appreciate your attention and time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
I can officially say James has left the building. Take care, everyone. See you in 2 weeks' time.
Bye.